We are now in the point of the season where players are making or breaking their draft stock. There are guys who are coming out of absolute nowhere and can be taken in the first round, and there are also guys who are supposed to go in the top 10 or even number 1 overall who are falling like crazy. In today's video, we're going to talk about 6 different players who have broken their draft stock down. Whether it's going from the number 1 overall pick to the end of the first round, or going undrafted completely, there are some players who are really just falling apart, and today I want to spotlight 6 of them. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about 6 players whose draft stock has crashed. Okay, so the first player I want to spotlight is Evan Stewart. Coming out of Liberty High School in Texas, Evan Stewart was a 5-star recruit. Him and Luther Burden were the 2 top receivers in the class of 2022, and everyone could not wait to see Evan Stewart play at Texas A&M. He was part of that insane class, and in his freshman year, he caught 53 passes for 649 yards and 2 touchdowns. Last year, his stats would fall off though, as he only caught 38 passes for 500 yards, and he decided to transfer to Oregon. He'd now be in a better offense and in a better situation, so many expected Evan Stewart to be a first-round pick. Pretty much every mock draft you look at in the preseason had him going in the first round, but right now so far through the first half of the year, Evan Stewart has been a bust. He has 16 catches for 182 yards and 2 touchdowns. I know a ton of people are going to comment that he got hurt against Michigan State, but he's really only had 1 good performance this year so far, and other than that, Evan Stewart has been extremely disappointing. He has all the athletic potential in the world, and I'm not quite sure why he has not been able to put it all together. After being the number 1 receiver in your class and having 8 touchdowns through 3 seasons just isn't going to quite cut it. And while if he declared he'd definitely get drafted, his stock has fallen and he might need to come back for another season if things don't improve towards the end of this year. Both of the most hyped up running backs in college football in 2024 both are on this list, and we're first going to talk about Donovan Edwards. Coming out of high school, Edwards was a huge deal. He went to West Bloomfield High School in Michigan and decided to stay home and commit to the Wolverines. He was a 5-star recruit and the number 2 back in the class of 2021, and Edwards had a hot start to his career. As the backup to Blake Corum, he ended up running for 174 yards and 3 touchdowns in 2021, 991 yards and 7 touchdowns in 2022, and then this past season he ran for 497 yards and 5 touchdowns. While he's on pace to getting more stats this year than he did last season, the way he has played has been a lot different. He was so hyped up, he was put on the cover of NCAA Football 25 and was a projected first-round pick in a lot of mock drafts. Add in also the fact that he was supposed to be the number 1 running back, and Donovan Edwards was going to explode. Except so far this season, Edwards has 73 carries for 353 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's not even on pace to be an 1,000-yard running back, let alone the best back in college football. And what's funny is he got passed up by Kalel Mullings, who has taken over the running back 1 spot, and all of a sudden Edwards is in a tough spot. He also had a crucial mistake in their loss to Washington, and he went from a guy who was the number 1 back in college football to a backup, and his draft stock is currently free-falling. While he still might be able to save his season, Edwards has definitely been a huge disappointment this year. The third guy we need to talk about is Donovan Smith. Honestly, I had no idea he was actually seen as a legit NFL prospect, as I was looking through NFL mock drafts, his name kept coming up a couple of times. In one mock draft, he was projected to go at pick number 25 to the Dallas Cowboys. They said, quote, "There's always one quarterback surprise who catapults himself into round 1 discussion. Smith is my pick right now. At 6'5" and 240 pounds, he looks the part, plus he has mobility and a reasonable arm." I had no idea that Donovan Smith was seen as that big of a deal, as coming out of high school, he went to Friendship High School in Texas and was just a 3-star recruit who went to Texas Tech. So far, after 2 years at Texas Tech, he would transfer to Houston, where last year he threw for 2,800 yards with 22 touchdowns, and he also ran for 6 more scores on the ground. With new head coach Willie Fritz, many I guess were wondering if he could be like Michael Pratt, but instead, Donovan Smith has had an awful season. So far, he's passed for 694 yards with 2 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. Houston is making its case at being the worst Power 5 team in college football this year, and Donovan Smith all of a sudden had a major fall off. It's really sad to see, and I think he has 1 more year of eligibility, but for now, if he was a projected first-round pick, he's had a terrible fall off. The fourth guy we need to talk about has an interesting story. James Pierce Jr. has been quite the polarizing prospect. When he was a senior, he had 14.5 sacks and 9 pass breakups. The guy was a defensive end, and somehow, some way, he could do a little bit of everything. He was a 5-star according to some site, and a 4-star according to the composite, and would decide to enroll at Tennessee. He played in 13 games as a true freshman and ended up having 2 sacks. 2023 would be his breakout season, in which he only started 3 games, but ended up becoming a first-team All-SEC player. Obviously, he was really good as he had 10 sacks, but the fact that he didn't start was definitely interesting. Going into this season, James Pierce Jr. was seen as a #1 overall pick. In my mock draft video I did back in August, James Pierce Jr. was projected to go #1 overall, and I just didn't quite understand it. Top 10 or top 5, yeah, but what NFL franchise would spend the #1 overall pick on a defensive end? He would definitely need to have good stats if he was going to go #1 overall. So far in 2024, James Pierce Jr. just has 1.5 sacks through the team's first 5 games. Yes, they are trying to double team him, but Pierce has not even come close to matching last year's level of output, and scouts are starting to take notice as I've watched him drop from the top 5 to the top 10 to the top 15 and now near the back of the first round. Ultimately, I still think he'll be a first-round pick, but James Pierce is going from a guy who was supposed to be Myles Garrett level to now falling to just the first round. We'll have to wait and see, but this is definitely a situation to watch. Okay, the 5th guy we're to talk about has a really sad story today. Olly Gordon II was one of the most fun players to emerge from the 2023 college football season. He became the best running back in college football at Oklahoma State, took over the Cowboys offense, and was supposed to be the #1 back in college football this year. There were some rumors that Olly would transfer to Oregon, but he decided to stay back at Oklahoma State instead of getting that huge NIL payday somewhere else. Going back in time, he was a 4-star recruit coming out of Trinity High School in Texas, and Gordon so far has played in 3 years, as in 2022 he had 308 yards and 2 touchdowns, but last year was his breakout campaign with 1,700 yards and 21 scores. As I said, he turned down that NIL paycheck, and he was projected as a 2nd-round pick going into this year. So far, Olly has run the ball 101 times for 384 yards and just 4 touchdowns. He's had an injury scare, and his average yards per carry went from 6.1 to 3.8. Gordon's stock has completely fallen apart, and I don't think it's his fault. His offensive line is terrible, the offensive play calling is terrible, and Mike Gundy just did not put him in a good spot to succeed. Honestly, Olly Gordon should have gone over to Oregon or should have gone somewhere else, and it's sad because this guy's talent is being wasted. He'll still definitely get drafted, but Olly Gordon might consider sitting out the rest of the season and going somewhere else because he is being set up to fail by his offensive coordinator and that Oklahoma State staff. Last year's quarterback class was loaded with talent at the top, but this year it was going to be a little bit of fall off. Carson Beck was expected to be the #1 quarterback prospect, and many thought he was the #1 overall pick for next year's draft. Carson Beck was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school, and after originally committing to Alabama, he ended up going to Georgia. In 2021 and 2022, he was the backup to Stetson Bennett before he took over in 2023, throwing for 3,900 yards with 24 touchdowns and 6 picks. Beck was seen as a guy with a strong arm, good physical measurables, and the potential to become the franchise quarterback of this year's draft class. Many were talking about him winning the Heisman, but so far in 2024, Beck has been disappointing. He went from completing nearly 73% of his passes to now just completing 65% of his passes, and he has 1,300 yards with 12 touchdowns and 3 picks. He played just okay against Clemson and did not play that well against either Bama or Kentucky, and so far against better defenses, he is just not looking that great, and Beck has lost whatever spark he had. He's now gone from a guy who's supposed to go in the top 5, and I now see him towards the back of the first round. Guys like Cam Ward, Quinn Ewers, and Shedeur Sanders have been passing him up, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Beck falls to the 2nd or 3rd round if things don't get better here soon. But there is hope on the horizon, as I do think Beck has all the potential in the world. He just needs to figure it out and wake up a little bit. So yeah, today we talked about 6 players who had meteoric draft stock in the beginning of the season and have now lost it. Most of these guys were pretty highly recruited or had huge 2023 seasons, so sometimes stuff like this happens. But what do you guys think? What do you think of all 6 of these guys? Are they going to solve their draft stock issue, and who should I cover next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all of the videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.